So I hope some things are starting to kind of stick, and you're getting an understanding of the how this integrates in terms of a person's connection with the church, and how that inspires radical generosity within them, and what our part is in that as the body of Christ, encouraging and building one another up in the midst of that. And I was talking to Jim earlier. Where has he gone? And another Jim in the yellow shirt. I saw him. Okay. There. And in our conversations, it reminded me about another element of all of this that I want to just briefly say something to you about. And I think some of this has already been going on today. But in the sense of being emergent or authentic, Jim said, you know, that one of the things, can I say this? Jim in the yellow shirt. Rob. Sorry. Rob Jim back here. Or Jim Rob. He's a southern boy. His parents didn't want to call him Jim Bob because that was his dad's name. So he's Jim Rob. Oh, and his sister is Jim Robetta. So he was saying, you know, the thing that scares me to death in all of this that I'm hearing from you is that we have to be genuine. And, right? And so it reminded me that an element of authenticity that I think we so need to understand in the church, and that I think Jesus gave us permission to do, is to be vulnerable. To open ourselves up and be vulnerable. And that's part of that self-giving that we can do. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be easy. But I do think that it will be fruitful. And I thank God that Jesus chose to be vulnerable so that we could understand what it means to live in the fullness of our humanity and be vulnerable with others. Because what I believe is that it is through our wounds, too, that we find our true humanity. And it's through our woundedness, because that's kind of fleshly. It's incarnate. And I think we need to live fully into that as emotional beings, as spiritual beings, and as physical beings. And we need to create communities, authentic communities, that allow us to do that safely. Because we all have experienced pain and suffering in our lives. And there is a reality there that can be powerfully attended to by Christ. And it's when we are in the midst of that we can then start to receive the healing and the wholeness that God has for us, God desires for us. And so I wanted to offer that to you. So thank you, Jim Rob. So the next E in our 6 E's is engaging. And we've talked a little bit about this in the midst of our conversation about evangelism. That, by the way, do you know what the simple definition of evangelism is? It's one beggar telling the other beggar where the bread is. It's sharing the good news. Simply that. So if we can understand evangelism as that, then it can be easier for us to engage and say, you know, I've struggled with that too. And I had this incredible opportunity to find some strength in a community that helped me with that. That's being vulnerable owning that and then saying how your life is being changed in the midst of that struggle. And we're all in this together. So I want to say that to you. So how do we invite people? And that's one of the ways that we can invite them. So it's just entering into conversations. And so we need to invite, we need to greet, we need to orient, and we need to incorporate people in when we engage. So it means that we are going to have this radical hospitality that engages people where they are. We invite them into the process of becoming a greater participant in the body of Christ, whether they are inside our community or they are outside the walls of our community. So it's an invitation to participate fully in the body of Christ. And when people from outside the community get there and people inside, we need to make sure that we're greeting them, that they are met with welcome, that it's important that we live that out in ways that say, you are valuable. I care about what you have to offer to the whole. In fact, we are incomplete without you. So we want to welcome you in and have a more fuller experience ourselves. And then one of the ways that we do that is we begin to orient people into the life of what it means to be a member of the body. So there are some things that we do. We try to live differently, and we want to, if we're going to engage them, we don't need to have secrets. We are the church of acronyms. Name a few. BCP, ECW, ERD, UTO, urinary tract obstruction. It's painful. Oh, that was taped. So, how are we orienting people and incorporating them into the life of the body? How are we saying, you know what? We do have some expectations here. It's not about lowering the bar. People want to be a part of something. You know, this is the way we live together in community. So how do we orient people? And then, how do we incorporate them? And all of these, this inviting, this greeting, this orienting, and then we're called to incorporate them. So earlier you asked me, you know, so how did you do this at St. Thomas? Remember I said that we had 97% of the people, of the adults, able-bodied adults, were involved in ministry outside of warming a pew on Sunday morning? The issue is that we made it our purpose to incorporate them into the fuller life of the body, to invite them into ministry. We were intentional, not just me, but a whole leadership team, of looking at people and helping them to discern their gifts and encouraging them in ministry. I mean, it can be as simple as sitting behind someone. You know, we're the Episcopal Church. We always have assigned pews, right? And so you've been sitting behind someone that's new to the church. They've been coming for about 6 weeks, and we've been thinking about greeting them. But we noticed that they have this incredible voice in singing. And we say, Karen, I was noticing your singing. It's really incredible. Have you thought about maybe joining the choir? Or do you have some interest that you might want to go a little more deeply into the community here? I've been noticing you've been coming for a while. So asking them the question, what's important to them, but also identifying gifts that you recognize and say, wow, you have an incredible voice. Have you thought about the choir? Well, no, but I've always sung in the shower. Nobody's ever told me that before, you know? So, I mean, my dog howls when I do that. But So how do we do that? How do we do that? So it's a sense of incorporating people into the fuller life of the body, and it bears fruit in their sense of belonging. So it builds that community. The other thing that I find is through ministries, as I've been saying, is people find meaning and purpose and value in their lives because people count on them. And then, well, gosh, I've got to get up and go to the soup kitchen today, or I've got to go to the knitting ministry today. They're counting on me. Those are value-added phrases. Those are purposeful phrases. Those are meaningful phrases. It's important for them to be a part of the whole. And when they get there, they find out that, wow, we have a community. So that's why it's so important that we engage people, we invite them, we greet them warmly with the love of Christ. We give them an orientation so they feel like they are part of it and not outsiders. And then we invite them more deeply to participate through the ministries of the church. So it really does help to connect their giving. This is a guy that I chose this picture because I thought, you know, this guy has a lot of joy. And you've got to think that he's feeling that his life is meaningful. Look at all these kids saying, hey, we think you're cool, and we really enjoy being in your presence. We value you. In fact, we love you. That's what I see going on in that picture. And certainly, he's got community. So, as people are engaged in these sorts of ways, they give not only of their financial gifts, but they give of themselves. Because what we find is their heart resides in the midst of this. And what did Jesus say about that? Wherever your treasure is, there also your heart will be. And I love taking that language and doing this, because I think it is so true in our world today, and I'm not so sure it wasn't what Jesus meant. Probably both of those. But wherever your heart is, there also will be your treasure. If you still have a checkbook and not just a debit card, it's a pretty clear indication of where your heart is. Confession, you could see that my heart was on the back row of the Target stores in Champion Forest of Houston, because it was about 2 blocks away from the church, and I would go on break, and I would want to get somewhere where it was just kind of not church. My cell phone didn't work very well in there because of all the metal in the ceiling. And I would go and just peruse the back row because that's where all the clearance aisles were. Well, one day I pulled out my checkbook, and almost every check was to Target. And I thought, what am I doing? I'm worshiping at the God of consumerism's altar. And I didn't even need that stuff. Some of it, that was 11 years ago, 12 years ago. I still have some of that stuff in boxes. Light fixtures. Now, I used a lot of it when we bought our house in Wharton. What's up with that? So wherever our heart is, there our treasure will be also. So when we engage people and help them to their heart to find home in the body of Christ, then they will be inspired to be radically generous. And fuel the mission of the church. So the next E that I would talk about that is important to us, and I think we miss a lot of the nuances of this. Some of it's because of political overtones. Some of it is backlash from science and disbelief of that. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter from that standpoint. In the first chapter of Genesis, we're called to be stewards of creation. So I don't care what the science says about global warming or climate change. We're called to be good stewards, to understand that it is not only ours, but it is for all people and all of creation to use. And so we need to take care of it. It's part of our authenticity. It's part of how we live that out. Because the outside, the people that are not a part of the church, they know this. Because we did a good job of talking about Genesis. And they know it and they question us on it. And I got to tell you about an issue, a big issue that we have. We do not understand how this affects financial giving. Because I'm a Gen Xer, I don't want to pledge to a church that is using styrofoam. And I don't think a lot of people that are younger than me do either. Because what they say is, and what I say is, you're stealing money from me. Because guess who's going to have to clean this up? Okay? It's huge. You know what else it says? It says we don't care. Now, I'm not saying this to be judgmental about Calvary or anybody else that has these in the church. I'm saying it to sensitize you to the reality of what people out there think and people in younger generations think. Because this doesn't fly in the stewardship world. It's formative. And it can be a positive formation to say we're not going to do it, or a negative one to say, I'm not giving because I feel like you're taking money away from me. So environmental stewardship is key to the work that we do in forming stewards in the world. And I think some of the easiest things for us to understand as another kind of entry point, or what my bishop says is a threshold, is that it's pretty easy for us to understand when we're driving down the road, hopefully in our Prius, Kipper. I don't have one, I confess. That we don't throw trash out the window. We've done a pretty good job of that since the 70s, of teaching against that. Because somewhere in there, we understand that somebody behind us is going to see that or have to pick it up. And so there is an other orientation there. So environmental stewardship ministries in our parishes can have a huge effect on financial giving. It is connected. It's not a direct connection, so sometimes we feel like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm telling you, it matters. If you don't believe me, you can ask my son, who hates the way I wash dishes, who is always going and turning the water off on me. And he's probably right. So I want you to understand how amazingly important that is. It develops a culture of responsibility. And it helps to form the steward's heart. Another thing that I think is really important about it is that there are many ways when we engage in environmental stewardship that it positively affects the bottom line. So people see us being good stewards of the financial gifts that they had given. When we change out light bulbs to be LEDs or something that is more efficient than what we did before. We had a situation at a church in Houston I worked with on their electric service. We did an environmental survey with them. We were able to save them 40% on their electric bill. Guess what that meant for them? It was a staff position for an after-school program. A staff position. It was huge. So it can affect the bottom line in incredible ways. And so I offer that to you. The other thing about environmental stewardship is that it also, I want you to hear this, it's about our context. It's about our environment around us. So what is your context? Are you paying attention to who is in your midst? Are you utilizing the resources that you have available to you that are there? Are you looking at the seed that has fallen among the rocks and the weeds? And the seed that has fallen on the path that the birds have taken and gone and taken somewhere else. For instance, you're in a community that has several colleges or universities nearby. You have a pool of speakers that can come and talk to people in the Episcopal Church. We like educated programs. People that can come in and speak articulately about different issues in the world. That's an access that you have. They may have video conferencing systems that you can utilize. So meeting spaces, additional things. So it's the essence of it is to look not only at what you have, but what you have at your disposal. For us, one of the things that we see environmentally is, in our context, we have both water and mountain. And so those are great places for us to take people and utilize those geographic areas. We have ski trips. We have excursions out into the woods. We have a tour of the Duwamish River that is an environmental hazard that was a very vital waterway for the Duwamish tribe that flows into the bay at the Port of Seattle. And it's in the midst of being cleaned up now. So we can use that as an educational experience to help people be inspired to be better stewards of creation and to understand that.
So I just want to call out Holy Comforter in Broomfield. Would you take a quick minute to talk about how you look at your context and develop your farmers market, and then St. Paul's Liquid? Can you talk about your solar panels?
Great.
Are you St. Paul's Liquid? Okay. So quick, because hey, I just think we got our own.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Let's hear that Texas accent.
Let me tell you all a story. I arrived at Holy Comforter in 2010, and there was already an environmental stewardship ministry in place. They called themselves Green, and they had replaced solar light bulbs in the building and installed single flush toilets. They were looking for their next project that they could do. And one of the amazing assets that we have at Holy Comforter is we front a major thoroughfare. And
Yeah.
So that pop-up tent city that happens on Tuesday afternoon, they're literally bringing almost 1,000 people on Tuesday, which is more than a month for us. To become the new face of Bloomfield.
So, do you guys talk about in the midst of hosting that do you promote buying local and that aspect of it, and say that that's an important? I mean, this is one of the ways we celebrate what we're doing, and we do evangelism because that's good news, and so we let people know about that. So that's really cool.
Well, what we buy for coffee hour. So, for instance, what products do we provide at coffee hour, and is that in sync with the values that we're promoting on Tuesday in the farmers market? Is it local? Is it healthy? Is it sustainably grown?
Right.
So, at the beginning of 28.
That's awesome. Awesome. So, how about solar panels?
Well, we also have an environmental stewardship committee.
You may want to stand up. You may want to stand and speak this direction.
We at St. Paul's, we also have an environmental stewardship committee who, you take little steps and do what you can, and it starts with recycling, and there's just a lot of little steps along the way. And what the committee took about a year to get through, to go all through all the hoops and stuff of getting solar panels up on our roof, facing south, and that has been installed, and you are all invited to come to our dedication for that on May 19th. In 2 weeks, where the mayor and city council people will be coming to say hooray for you. But we are also part of a sustainability group within our little community of Lakewood, the Ivor neighborhood, and they're starting a community garden at the school, and St. Paul's is involved with that and helping with that so that it's grown outside of our church. But it's amazing how people who drive by notice that and have commented and have called the church or something when they see those new solar panels. And we just start taking baby steps and we do little things, and it grows, and then a new idea comes, and a new idea comes. You don't start with a whole roof of solar panels, but that's where I would hate to say that's where we end up, because we're going to continue to do things and grow, but it's a great thing for the community and sustainability.
That's awesome. So I would say both of those instances are outward and visible signs of an inward and spiritual grace that's moving within your communities. And it works. It's awesome. And, certainly you are going to see an effect on the bottom line of the finances at the church per mission. It's also saying something about this is important to us because of our beliefs and what we value in the world, which, by the way, is you. We care about you too, and that's part of why we're doing this. So that's really cool stuff. Another thing, just kind of quickly, we had a church, and I wish I could remember which one it was. This was in the Diocese of Olympia, that recently, in the last couple of years, changed their boiler out. It paid for itself in 8 months. 8 months it paid for itself. Boilers are expensive. And so you can imagine what it did to the cash flow after that. And then they talked about it and said, so that people in the pews understood the good stewardship of that decision and what was going on there. So what I'd like to do at this point is have you guys talk about how you engage people within your community and outside, and invite them in, you greet them, you orient and incorporate them into the life of your church, and then also how you pay attention to the environment, both stewardship of creation and your context. And so you take about 10 minutes and do that. So if I can call your attention, we'll we'll move forward with the next thing, and then we're going to take a break here in a minute. So, just want to point out that the foundation has these wonderful booklets for you in terms of helping you with your environmental ministry. They have other resources as well, and so make sure that you're utilizing the resources that you have. And I think I said this before, but I want to remind you that those of you in this room are really rich resources for one another. So don't forget that. And part of the stories you've been sharing today, I'm sure that you've experienced that and learning that. So I want you to remember that that is an important context as well. The next piece that we have, the next E, is, before I go there, this morning, on our way here, Vivian and I stopped and supported my hometown company, Starbucks, and I want to point out to you, just to take this illustration one step farther. Early on, I had this, there was this debate over ceramic mugs, and styrofoam, and then it went, well, we'll do paper cups. This is not a paper cup. I chose to buy reusable cups for Vivian and me.
No, Anita.
I mean, Anita and me, excuse me.
No, I got the paper cup.
She got the paper cup. You are forgiven. So the point that I want to make is that a lot of times people will come, we can't do the ceramic mugs. We're going to do paper. And besides, that's better anyway. What I want to tell you is that it takes more water to produce a paper cup than it does to wash a ceramic cup one time, or probably more than once. So the water to produce one paper cup is more than it takes to wash a cup. Yeah, not to mention the tree. So ceramic mugs can be a really important ministry. And if you invest in one of those Hobart or other machines that does a wash in 2 minutes, you get a cart like Vivian has been pushing around. And you set that out with the plastic racks on it. It's what we did. And man, they just went right in and came in and out, and everybody left church at the same time at coffee hour, pretty much.
What did you say?
A Hobart washing machine. They have them at cafeterias, and it's like they're fun to, Tim the Toolman Taylor would have loved them. They're kind of like manly dishwashing machines, whatever. Whatever. But they take about 2 minutes to cycle through, and they have under the counter and the other ones. But anyway, commercial dishwashers that are short cycle, 2 minute, they run some, cleansers there. Anyway, just wanted to let you know that and see that. Yeah, and plastic bottles. We serve reusable. Our environmental commission gives away metal bottles, So just a way, yeah. Which, yes, and I actually brought my bottle that I got from the airport, and then I kept it. So anyway, to use it again. So the next E is Episcopal, and so it's important that we are true to our roots. I have to tell you, growing up in another tradition, it is such a blessing to be an Episcopalian, to understand that we are deeply connected. I grew up in a congregation that thought the sister congregation of the same denomination across town was the enemy. We are not that group. We have a rich tradition of community that we can draw from, and an incredible reach of assets because of that, just in human power. And so I want to tell you that. Be true to your Anglican roots. Be connected. Share resources. See how you might share a youth minister. That was my first job in the Episcopal Church. I worked for 3 churches and did a consortium, one large youth ministry. And Sunday mornings was a little crazy because I did serve, at least at 2 on most Sunday mornings. But it was great. And it was a great opportunity for them. A program-sized church, we had about 450 on a Sunday, another one that was about 220 on a Sunday, and another church that was about 120 on a Sunday. Had one consolidated youth ministry, and I changed from being the youth minister to being the coordinator of youth ministries and empowered other people so that we were a whole team doing that work. And so I offer that to you. We need to live out the theology of the Book of Common Prayer. The ministry of the church is listed with the laity first. And so you've heard me talking about empowering people for ministry to help give them meaning and purpose in their lives. Let's live that out. Let's live out our Episcopal and Anglican theology. We need to execute and participate in compelling liturgy that encourages and empowers people for Christ's work in the world. Our job on Sunday morning is to inspire people to live out their baptismal faith the rest of the week and to ask them to return the next Sunday, which brings up a question that was written on the board. Somebody asked me, how do I define outreach? Outreach for me is the people outside the walls of the church meeting their needs. More specifically, human needs, but it might be emotional or whatever. But anyway, it's meeting the needs of a hurting world. So it's outreach. When we do that inside the church, I call that pastoral care. And that even means if we're helping them with their light bill or a payment on their mortgage or rent or food. Outreach is outside. We are to be other-oriented. And so I bring that in on that. And that's part of our Anglican heritage as well. Archbishop, I've gone blank on which one now. No. In the 30s. I believe it was William Temple said that we are the only organization that was created for those outside of itself. Yeah, it was William Temple. That's outreach, okay? It's responding to the needs of the world outside of ourselves. Some people thought, I had some people from Broomfield in my congregation in Wharton, and they thought outreach was evangelism. And that's different. Now, evangelism can happen because we're doing outreach. But I don't necessarily think the people in the soup kitchen, we're not doing that to get them to come to church. We're doing that because we're loving them as our sisters and brothers. But other people will come to church because we're doing that work, because we're being authentic. So I hope that answers that question. And that's part of our Anglican heritage. F.D. Morris had something to say about that as well. So our liturgies should do that. If the bread that we break and the drink that we serve doesn't drive us out into the world to feed the hungering people out in the world, either physically or metaphorically, or to give the thirsting people out in the world either physical drink or metaphorical drink, then what we do is an abomination. In Amos, we hear the voice of God saying to Israel that had fallen into this liturgy of self-serving liturgy for liturgy. And it says, I hate your solemn assemblies. We cannot fall into that. We need to practice the outward focus of the theology that we have in our liturgy and practice it in compelling ways to inspire the people in the pews to move outside of themselves into the world to be the body of Christ. And I think that I call this living in this radical nature of the via media. So it means that we're exhibiting a transcendent God in a worldly culture that is spiritually hungry for the divine. So think about how you are engaging in that. How are you exhibiting a transcendent God in a worldly culture that is spiritually hungry for the divine? And I think that takes in our context, and it takes in us being Episcopalians. So then the next question is, and maybe this is the one that you really need to address, is how can our stewardship exhibit a bridge between the sacred and the secular? How can our stewardship exhibit a bridge between the sacred and the secular? Now, why don't you talk about that for about 5 minutes? So I'm going to call you back together as a large group, and I want to give you 2 examples that I heard of this transcendent exhibition. The farmer's market and how you engage and communicate that when people come onto the property, and the solar panels. And then how you engage and say that this is a value that we put forth out there that says you are important. And we want to be in relationship with you. I think that is deeply rooted. And so those are 2 examples that I saw. We're going to come back at 2:20 on that clock. So you have a break, and then we're going to come back, and that'll be, we're going to go through the packets of resources, and I'm going to answer questions and just kind of tell you what's there. And some of those I'll go into more depth on. And so just when you come back, you might want to have those ready.